In this week's Memes and Machines, we talked about the curation economy, or as some say, stealing work of others. Why is it big business? How do you avoid the pitfalls? How do you turn curation into inspiration, into a real personal brand? And finally, we explore the future in a world dominated by AI content creation. How do you truly stand out?
If you've got nothing valuable to say on social media, then just don't bother saying it at all.
I might need to get some age reversal cream so that I can be relevant on TikTok.
Boom.
Sit back, grab a cold beverage from the fridge and relax because you're now locked into the sounds of memes and machines.
Gents, good to see you. How are you both doing?
Good, thank you. How are
Very
you?
well, cheers, and you?
Good, good. It's Monday here. We're hitting the week hard. And we got a big topic this week. I'm really excited to dive into this with both of you. We are talking about the curation economy. What is it? Why does it matter? Where are the lines? Some call it the age of theft. Ben, give me a bit of a common definition of curation from your perspective, because front and center of your business is celebrating great work through artificial inspiration and many of the projects and companies you're involved with. So start with, what is your definition? How has it benefited you? And why do you think the curation economy is getting bigger?
So I look at curation in two simple ways when it comes to like creating content. It's either you're sharing something that already exists and celebrating that because you think it's cool, you think it's interesting, and you're adding onto it. But adding onto it is there's very different. There's a lot of levels to adding onto something. Something could be you simply are just resharing it, which is its lowest form of curation to your audience, to your reach. To the other end of the spectrum, where it's you are recreating that video or adding onto it, doing it in your own style with the core inspiration coming from a certain piece of content. And that could be either done in a way that is like actually you can't tell that where that inspiration came from. It because it's just so far away, but actually the seed was planted by that original piece of content. Or there's this like middle ground which I do quite like, where it's like people appreciating the content that inspired them. They like remixed it, like, and there's still pieces of the original content in the new one, and it's like now this sort of like co-collaboration, curation, appreciation piece of content that I think can build like some really good bridges between different creators and brands and businesses. And that's kind of the way that I look at it. It's like a large scale that creation can fall under.
Yeah, it's almost a changing of the guard, because if you think of creative, it's often been protected by intellectual property and copyright, and artists from every discipline have put restrictions around their works. And if you use it, if you leverage it, social media created this economy whereby content and attention converges, and suddenly now the barrier to distribute, share, contribute, co-create, and TikTok really sort of drove this. They were always under the guise of like a kids social media platform, but what they did better than any other, they maybe don't get the credit. One of the things that they did better than anyone was they introduced creator tools, meaning you could remix content, you could stitch things together. They built around this, what you're describing, this sort of collaborative economy. And we've seen that go further and further. And there are many facets to this. There's the devil's advocate, where, people are taking things too far. Brands are using music without the license. They're using images. they're using memes, famous scenes from films in like commercial content. So we'll park that for a second. That's like one aspect of it.
Yeah.
And then there's like this other point where, and I think I'd love to get your perspective, Chris, here, of like celebrating great work, great ideas, great content, maybe even doing like commentary around it. You know, personal brands are built around curation. Many of the top creators, particularly on LinkedIn, are just basically curators of interesting ideas, content, themes. So, Chris, give me your perspective. If you would say, what's your definition, and lay out some of the pros and cons from your personal perspective.
Yeah, it's a really interesting one. If you're an OG in the space, like blogs were the original way to curate, and it feels like social media is the new blog. It's where all the attention is, and blogs used to be just roundups. It wasn't even really people's opinions. It was just, here's the top 10 marketing campaigns of the week, or, you know, top 10 lists and stuff are very, very good for eyeballs and attention. I actually think that it's very useful if you have nothing to say that day. You know, like if you're not someone like Ben who plans probably weeks ahead with his content because he's a full-time content creator, maybe you wake up in the morning and go, I know I need to be present on social media today. I've got nothing to say. What's everyone else saying? That's a way to curate as well. Now, we've leaned heavily into it as an agency because lots of the work that we do is under non-disclosure and we can't actually post about this stuff. And like you said, I love to praise brands whenever I think they're doing a great job and give my spin on it. So yeah, there's many different ways to curate. I think the biggest thing here in terms of definition is why you should create and how you should curate. We discussed in the green room about this before the episode started, that there is a code of ethics that you should follow. Obviously, give people a tag if you know who made it. And if you don't know who made it, maybe don't share it, you know, do some research. That's the least you could do, is some due diligence as to where this came from and stuff like that. In order to do something like that, using like Google reverse image search is quite a useful one. Something like that. So yeah, curation to us is invaluable, but you have to do it right.
Do you know, can I ask a hard question?
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a hard question because I come up with this challenge in my mind often. In the creators and people that curate, I challenge how much people curate because they really care about what other people are creating, and actually how much is it to do because it's easy, low effort content that grows their own brand.
Totally. Yeah, I think
because there are two sides to that.
100%.
And I think some people are 50-50. Some people, I don't think, care about what they're sharing.
100%.
They just know what they're sharing is easy to share and it grows their brand for their own interest. We're all doing it for ourselves.
Yeah. And
let's just be straight. Like,
I completely agree with that, mate. I don't think that's controversial at all. In fact, I'd say it's like a spectrum, you know, there's every end of it. And I see people in LinkedIn sharing stuff absolutely nothing to do with what they do. You know, it's just a general good news story or something like that. And yet they sell Web3 services. And it's like, if you're going to curate, at least make it somewhat relevant to you, or make the spin somewhat relevant to you. You know, even if the news is about something like politics, how does it relate to you? Why are you talking about it? That needs to be your spin on curation. It's not interesting if you just share something and it's just anything, you know, like it needs to have some tie back into what you do and what you believe or your ethics or something like this. Like you need to make it somewhat yours, otherwise it is irrelevant.
But you're still getting successful off the back of other people's work.
Yeah,
I could say that, right? You know, I fall into this boat as well, so I don't mind discussing it, and it's something that I, you know, think about like morally and ethically. Like I'm winning off other people's work, and that's now what a lot of people take advantage of.
Well, I'll tell you why you have that opinion, right? Because you're doing and talking about individual creators, whereas I'm sharing big brand campaigns whereby they want to get a feature in every magazine and everything. So we're actually helping their marketing budget and push by resharing their things, and they love it. So in terms of other creators, they don't particularly love it if you know, steal someone's content. And this is the spectrum I'm talking about. I'm thinking from a brand's point of view, that's actually never a bad thing. The more reshares you can get, that's the whole point of them making a campaign, you know?
Yeah, I think you both touch on some really interesting questions. One of them, it's funny you mentioned what you did, Ben, because me and my friends were discussing an agency owner that's built a huge following, and 98% of things they share is simply curation,
Mm,
curation of great ideas. And the question was an earnest one. We said in one of our group chats is, does this actually work for
mm,
him and his business? And the question that we kind of got was, it works in the sense of visibility. It works in a sense of he has an opportunity to show his beliefs, his ideas through the work of others
mm.
in many respects, what he cares about. And it goes to your point, Chris, around intention. You
Yeah.
shouldn't do it for the wrong reasons. It still needs to be it still needs to form part of it, like has to be earnest and
Mm,
authentic. And it's one of the principles I speak on a lot about why does anyone share. I've spent the last 10 years working in social media marketing in some capacity, and the question I always ask myself is, why would anyone share this? It's usually the holy grail of a brand metric. You create a
mm,
campaign, a piece of content, an idea. People love it enough to share it. Well, they only ever share for three reasons. Number one, to brag. Why do people share? To brag. That's one big. I'm on holiday, so I'm going to show all my friends and make them jealous. Whether we like to admit it or not, that's a huge reason why we share online. Brits particularly have this second camp, which is self-deprecate. You share online of like to
mm.
show your sense of humor. And we have quite a self-deprecating nation, so we'll often, talk about running out of money at the end of the month, spending too much. People will share. The third camp is where I believe brands and other creators can sit, sharing things that say something about your identity. And your identity can mean your political views, your professional interests, your personal passions, or someone has said the thing in the room that you agree with, but haven't been able to articulate or create. So they're my three buckets: from showing off, self deprecating, or it says something about your identity. And to your original point, Ben, people do it because it's easy. The
Mm.
barrier to do it is lower. It's you're sharing things that have already been validated to be successful. If you like it, chances are many others will like it. So you're sharing premium, better content, which again has more chance of virality. The big question we should all ask ourselves is, what is the value? And I think it plays a role, but I don't think it gives as much value to the individual or brand as many people make out, because usually people's objective measure of success is how many followers or how much growth or how much reach. But that doesn't tell me anything what I think of you. You know what I mean? I might appreciate your idea. So I think it's a very nuanced topic,
Mhm.
and it's something that many in the personal brand industry, particular, probably should ask themselves some questions.
Yeah, so do you know what? This is why I hate LinkedIn sometimes, right? because of the curation that happens on LinkedIn involving people's content who aren't on LinkedIn. And
Mm.
this is something I've voiced to my audience, particularly short form creators and long form creators. So TikTok, Instagram shorts, and then YouTube longer form. People are constantly discussing great ideas and great pieces of content on LinkedIn, curation, to generate themselves views. And they are referencing people that aren't on LinkedIn
Mhm.
so that the value back to the original owner of the piece of content, compared to the person who's posting that content on LinkedIn, I think they're getting more value than the original owner of the video. And that pisses me off because they shouldn't, in my opinion. If something's created something really, really great, but then somebody posts an article on it that's also really, really great, because that person isn't on LinkedIn, and it's just like navigating through to them and just the behavior of people on socials, I don't think the value is that great back to that individual user, unless that like post is being posted a lot by lots
Mm.
of people. But if it's just one off or two off, then like I'm just like, I wish this creator was getting the value of your post here, but they are not, because they're not here, and you're eating up the value.
Can I tell you, Ben, this is how social media has evolved for like the last 10 years. So one of the things most large content creators did before everyone else is they would go onto Twitter, look at a trending topic or picks an idea that had virality and literally copy and paste on another platform.
Yeah.
And they would, because it's pre-validation. If it's gone viral once, there's a chance it may go viral again. That validation economy is like an offshoot of, it's a behavior that's been adopted. And it's adopted. And like the question is the ethics around it and how do you stop it? And one of the things I've noticed a lot, people now have the conviction to call out creators. So whether it's like your work has been stolen, some people take that very seriously and attack that person, some don't. But what you're seeing now is a lot of reference points in the community. It's almost like community notes. People will say, oh, well, it was good when that person shared it a month ago, or something of that nature. I noticed a lot in some of my content is people's first response to something is like, oh, I saw this a while ago. And, or like, it's that, I saw it first. It's all these kind of human traits.
I can explain your hatred of LinkedIn though, Ben, because they're not creators there, mate.
Yes, I know they're not creators. They're not.
But also, I'll tell you something else is, unlike every other social media, less than 1% of LinkedIn people post regularly. And this is because of the professional fear of judgment about getting their opinions out there and getting fired for it. And there's no incentive, to do that. Whereas they're being told constantly by their boss, you need to have a presence, you need to post, you need to do this. And they're like, but I'm not a creator. I don't want to film myself. I don't want to, So then they're like, well, what's actually everyone talking about? Because that's the safe bet, as you said. And then that's when you start to get curation in the worst form. And the stealing, from X is a real big issue, isn't it? Like, I really can't stand the screenshots of Twitter posts that get reshared on LinkedIn. And LinkedIn needs to do better at knowing and understanding original content from an original creator and then promoting this further. But the algorithm isn't incentivizing that. Actually, LinkedIn's algorithm is a news feed. So all top 1% of LinkedIn users are curating more than creating. And that's because the algorithm is built that way.
And can I add, there's probably one thing that's the dirty secret of the industry, and it's the fact that 90% of the top LinkedIn creators are not doing their own content.
That's what I'm saying, yeah. None of them do.
They are not even touching their own content. They're not even
creators.
What do you mean by that?
They are hiring an agency, a personal brand manager. They're using people. It's so void. It may have started as their ideas and their perspectives and a level of support, but it's got to a point now where it's not even them. It's not their ideas.
I know, and it's stupid to think it ever was them, though, mate. Because who is it? Like, it's Theo Pafitis, a Dragon's Den employee, or someone like that. And you're like, and then you see the comments, and it's like, what do you think of this, Theo? And it's like, do you not realize that it's a PR agency like Greater Influence or something like this? Like, there's no CEO who's just mulling around on a social media all day. They have a multinational company to run.
So
that's the end point,
I will jump in and defend not Theophytus, but Great Influence.
Not him specifically, but
the economy. Like the reason I say that, he's one of my best friends, and actually, I think 90% of the personal brand industry haven't earned their stripes, have never really built brands, and aren't authorities. He's in the rare camp of him and his team actually encourage pursuing the right metrics and only speaking on things you care about. What they provide is a level of support for people that can't construct their ideas in the most optimally effective way. But 100%, Chris. I agree with you. You're like spot on. But I have to defend my boy.
No, totally, mate. I'll give a different one. So Gary V, right? Gary V. Everyone.
Go after Gary V. Go for it.
Yeah, everyone looks up to Gary V. Now, what people seem to fail to realize is that Gary V has a team of 20 people following him around all day, every day, making his content. You know,
they are his ideas, though. They are his ideas. It's like documenting. Yeah. That's the difference. I think there's too many people that don't even have anything to say. That's the problem, right? I still think there's a distinction between the two of like being effective and efficient and having people support you versus having nothing to say. And too many people in the industry literally have nothing to say. So the question becomes, why are they doing it?
Dude, it's LinkedIn, right? I'm gonna just put my foot down here and talk some shit. LinkedIn, right? So I agree with everything that's been said here. The reason why people are saying it when they've got nothing else to say is because of this just toxic corporate environment on LinkedIn where everybody feels like they have to be building their personal brand. And the irony of them, the ironic thing is they're on a platform that's the fakest personal brand platform that exists because everybody's creating there because of corporate pressure rather than on TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, where nobody in their corporate job is telling them they have to start TikTok. Nobody's telling them they have to start Instagram or YouTube. People that create there because they want escapism. They want escapism from corporate to create something that they're truly passionate on. And if they can do it for a long period of time, it shows even more passion because it's hard, right? It's hard just like on the other platforms, there's none of this like commenting like stuff. It's higher effort making videos. It just is, right? And in order to make high effort content, you really, for a long period of time, you have to be really passionate about what you're doing. But people turn up on LinkedIn and think, oh, well, I can just do a bit of comment engaging. I can just, share something that, is related to my job. And, here I am now building my personal brand. And are you building your personal brand or are you building your corporate brand? Because I think they're two separate things here.
Yeah, well, that's the thing is every other platform you can post about whatever you want without the fear of judgment of your company firing.
Yeah, and so that's a true personal brand, is it not?
Yeah.
Because if you're building a personal brand that's based off of corporate pressure, that's not an authentic personal brand.
No, not at all. It's your PR self.
Yes. Maybe that is a personal brand. I don't know what the definition of a personal brand is, but for me, it's being your true, unapologetic self that is your own true views, and the things that you are genuinely passionate about, rather than look at me, I'm interested in this just because I feel like I have to show that I'm interested in this because it's related to my corporate job. When actually, if you could post about anything you wanted in the world, would you post about that? That's what I ask myself when I'm looking at people's posts.
Actually, this is a great question for you, Oliver. So I think there's only 10 brands on LinkedIn that will allow true, authentic self. I can start naming them. Monzo Bank, Innocent Drinks, Greg's. These sorts of brands are the ones that will allow their staff members to do memes and funny things and other things. Whereas accountancies, lawyers, anyone that's in true corporate, they really don't. You have to be super careful about what you say because it could lead to a lawsuit at that company's behalf. So maybe that is your big frustration with it. But who else have you seen that will allow, the cool brands?
Yeah, I think it's all about advantages. If you go back 10 years, every company had a social media policy, and think of how many people used to put in their social handles, the views are my own, not my company. You see that less and less now. So obviously we're seeing a shift, and I think that shift has come alongside the era of employee engagement and personal brand. And the way I think personal brand is a loaded word. It's being filled with bad actors. It's become dirty. And to me, I've always thought of the personal brand, particularly on social media, as your digital reputation. That's the way I view it. And everything I say online, as a brand, as a company, as an individual, people form an opinion, positive, indifferent, or negative. So that's where the minute that you try and be something you're not, to Ben's point, like when you're not being personal, you're not you, it's built on rocky foundations. It's inauthentic. One thing the world online will never accept is hypocrisy. I talk a lot about rappers. There's a reason that rappers can talk misogynistic, talk about their past life, talk about drugs, do all of these things because it's authentic to their life, and they can say that today without getting cancelled online. But if you are like whiter than white, like the perfect person, you've got the perfect online image, and you're caught cheating on your partner, you're a scumbag. So like there's a difference. It's like you have to make personal brand has to be personal. Otherwise, what is the point? And I think if you're going to invest the energy in it, it's a laborious, time-consuming content. I work 3 jobs, by the way, guys. My core business, and you're all the same, is like what I do to build a company and earn a living. I then have a second job, which is writing, thinking, creating these, having these conversations. That's on top of my job. And then I have a third job, which is I have to curate knowledge and learn new things to drive the content engine. I have to try new tools. I have to hear something. I have to watch something. I have to read something. So I consider that a big commitment. And I'm not going to do that unless there was significant upside. So that's my personal view on personal brand. To answer your question more directly, Chris, brands who I think do it authentically, I think startups have a huge advantage because they're not encumbered by risk.
Yeah.
And I wish more
They
startups
can
would
move
be
faster
willing.
too, right?
They
Like
can
that's
move
the
fast. Everyone overestimates their brand, by the way.
Yeah.
We all think more people know about us than they actually do.
Yeah.
Companies the same. When you're a 2-year-old SaaS startup where you live and breathe everything you do, you assume the world cares. They don't. No one knows about you. You don't actually have a brand yet, by the way. A brand, and this is data driven, according to Coca-Cola, a brand takes 7 years to form. And I'd probably say, arguably, brands can be built quicker, but they're the outliers. They're the outliers. The average brand. How many companies and how many people have stayed in your life for 7 years? Not many. So by that definition, there are not many brands. There are not many brands. There are images and words and pictures, but there aren't that many brands. And like the challenge I have going back to root question around the curation economy is it doesn't tell me anything about what you think. It tells me what you like. And you'll never build a real digital reputation or brand until you actually say what you bloody think.
Yeah.
And that's
Well,
why I do this. I like doing this with you guys, or like it's the
Right.
reason I don't speak to marketeers in this forum because they're not able to say the thing that they actually believe. Whereas I
Yeah, they
feel like
won't
YouTube
voice their
probably
opinion.
will.
Yeah, they won't voice their opinion. I love that the fact that Coke, by the way, client, 7 years, right? I'd never heard that. That's fascinating.
Yeah.
Guess who just turned 7 years old as a brand? Liquid Death, billion-dollar water brand. Now, what's their tone of voice? Well, they analyzed that every other water brand is the most boring thing on earth. You know, Evian, these types of brands. And they were like, you know what? We're going to put skulls on the front of things. We're going to be like, and now why are they a billion-dollar water brand? People might ask. It's because people see their personality in the brand. It's fun, it's engaging, it's sarcastic, it's everything that every other water brand is not. And you may not have bought any other water brands before, but you might now buy Liquid Death because they represent music and rock and roll and all this sort of like, you know, other tone of voice that you were always waiting for. So tone of voice doesn't just work for personal brands, it works for actual brands. And like, you can really crush it if you have the right tone of voice, but you need to stay consistent. Like when Kit Kat and Decathlon just reacted to this latest blue screen of death thing, that made sense because that's what their brands do. You know, they did it within 24 hours. They did it out of home. It was as a billboard, clever copywriting, totally nailed the tone of voice in both regards. Now, if another brand had tried to do that, would have sunk like a ship, you know? It just doesn't fit the mold. So you, like you say, 7 years to get to that tone of voice. I actually totally agree. Liquid Death is still finding their tone of voice, but they've hit the nail on the head so far.
what there are many. We could do a whole episode breaking down why they've transcended every
Totally.
category and built. But one of the things I admire is they've created a culture that appreciates irreverent, funny, creative.
Yeah.
Like if you just think of their partnerships, if you just think of like what they have to consistently show up.
Mhm.
And I'm a big believer in, I've worked with a lot of startups. And one of the most important thing I think startups should do when there are no risks or lower risks is like find a really provocative, humorous tone of voice and relentlessly pursue that. Because once you get that one win, it's addictive. And
It is if that's authentic to you, though, you know. I don't think, you know, I think the creative director at Liquid Death said it best. He said, I want to have the most fun of any brand. That's his goal. And like what Ben said, you know, the people doing these individual YouTubes and TikToks, that's their goal too. You can't be in content long term if you're not having fun.
But
So
it
if
depends.
that is your tone of voice, go for it. But if it's not, you can't make it your tone of voice to be sarcastic.
So then what do you do then?
But
So it's because the question I've got in my head after what you guys are talking about is, if a brand is a legacy brand and now there's all this opportunity on social media to around meme culture, around, you know, things that are happening and having an appropriate like reactive piece of content to topical events. How does a brand do that that's never done that before?
That's really hard. Because
How do they now step into that realm and
really,
find their
really
tone of
hard.
voice
Exactly.
that's a less serious tone of voice, that's away from their normal corporate branding and the way they traditionally do social media? Because the opportunity is there for every brand, but figuring out how do they step into that space and not damage reputation is the hardest thing.
So I think there's a spectrum. Like you guys, you have parts of your personality that are serious, and you have spaces where you act your most serious self and scenarios. There are other parts where you're a silly goose, you're playful. And I think brands they are multifaceted in that sense. And if you think of what you're describing there as like new incumbent, think when you're a startup, you have every disadvantage. You don't have as many resources. You don't have as much capital. You don't have a reputation. You don't have a brand. What do you have? Well, you have the ability to be agile. You have the ability to say things in the room without repercussions. And you have the advantage of like forming your identity. Whereas after 50 years of being a company, it's kind of crystallized. It can evolve, it can reiterate. But at the start, you should find your voice in the world. And most brands we admire for being social first and really irreverent, they found it over time. You know, very few people will know, Chris, that like Liquid Death's been around 7 years. It's like,
I had to Google it, mate. I had to Google it as you said that. I was like, 2017. Oh my God, that's literally 7 years ago this year.
Yeah, that's an overnight $1 billion success story. 7 years. Right. The whole point of that, and I generally think as a early stage company or a startup, you have two choices. You can play the attention game and do things that are going to be optimally effective, or you can be redundant and indifferent, and maybe you might pull it off because your product's superior. Maybe your product's superior. Maybe you'll work harder than everyone else. Maybe. But if you want to put the odds in your favor, I just think I don't know why you wouldn't show the most extreme, the most playful side of your business. Every brand you admire today is probably doing that.
Well, that's a really good point, because if you've got nothing to lose, it's not that bad if it goes wrong, right?
Exactly.
Like you can experiment. You can say, okay, let's try this. And if it doesn't work, sod it. You know, it doesn't matter that it didn't work. Let's try again with something else the next day and keep going until you find that thing. Like so many brands are launched off the back of one viral thing, you know? They try loads of stuff and then something sticks. They throw all the spaghetti at the wall. One of them sticks. And then all of a sudden you've got $1 billion brand off the back of that. Like it's fascinating, isn't it? Like to see how this stuff plays out. But one thing I would say is your audience even there, right? Like if you don't sell to TikTok users, i.e. the average person on TikTok, why the hell are you doing TikTok trends? You know, like these are the things I keep saying to brands all the time. It's like, you're a B2B company. Stop using Hawk Doer and TikTok memes as your thing. Like, that doesn't make sense for your tone of voice. That's not even where your customers are. So, like, if you're forcing a legacy brand into new social media like TikTok, only if it makes sense, because that's where your audience is.
Can I challenge that? The reason I challenge that is there are things you look at and view and spaces you play in and find your entertainment way outside. We have these conventional beliefs that if I'm going to do B2B or I'm going to do marketing in a conservative environment, I will do LinkedIn or I will have a media plan on Meta. The reality is probably, and I'd have to review the data again, but most people, even if you work in a corporate, and particularly in B2B where the buyers and the influencers are multifaceted, there's a lot of serious people on LinkedIn. The vast majority of, on TikTok, the vast majority of social media users are silent. They are silent. They're just consumers. You described it at the start. 99% of people on LinkedIn are just consuming. They're not creating. And that's been the arbitrage and opportunity that many people have seen. But I would challenge that convention that, like, if you're a serious brand, you shouldn't be on TikTok. As a headline, what I would say is it depends. But I agree with the root principle around, like, everything you do as a marketeer should have a purpose. Otherwise, what we do, and we have too many choices, too many channels, too many directions you could go. Yeah. So the only way to win is be disciplined around where the opportunity is. But you have this other factor is, where can I earn more attention? And spaces like TikTok for the last 5 years have been it. Over time, diminishing opportunity as it becomes more congested and more people do it. So the answer is always, if you want unfair outlier advantages, you create in spaces where others aren't. You have to front run. You can never follow the playbooks of the gurus and the, legacy people. You will not find your advantages there. You can still win, but you won't find those kind of outlier opportunities that we all seem to want.
I think you've just described the biggest paradox in social media, which is everyone says you need to be everywhere all the time, but then those that specialize in one or two do much better. So, like, there's something in between as the answer to that actual thing, like, we don't have a huge presence on X or TikTok, but we take Instagram and LinkedIn very seriously and other things like this. But, we're a two-man band, so we couldn't, if we did every single platform to the level we do those two, we'd do nothing else and no client work. So it's all about, like, picking your poison and, like, really doubling down once it's working for you. But I think maybe trying all of them and seeing what sticks in that spaghetti thing is another thing, But also, you can't just use a social scheduler and spray and pray, as I call it. You can't post the same thing to every platform. TikTok trends scare the hell out of me, honestly, Ben, because they're so thick and fast, and like, you're irrelevant if you don't know something that's yesterday, whereas LinkedIn is the same stuff that was posted 10 years ago probably does well today.
Yeah, well, just building on that, I would say your strategy around its focus, but it leads me to a broader point around AI. So you said today we can't be everywhere and on every platform. We are moving into a world where that statement becomes less and less true.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Opus clips, right?
Yeah, but so the problem is with that, and I had somebody call me out on a tweet the other day around repurposing and reposting. He said, "Did you use any AI tools to repurpose?" And I think this is a conversation we had on the last one. But the problem with AI tools at the moment is they don't really allow you to take a top tier piece of content and transform that into a top tier piece of content on another platform in your own tone of voice, because it doesn't understand the nuances of virality. And I said, this could be understood. Somebody has to build a data set that is super tuned into nuances on platforms that cause virality, and then build another data set that fully understands somebody's tone of voice, way of speaking, based off of all of their posts. However, the posts that person has to have enough data in those posts to have gone viral to understand how that person's tone of voice combined with conventional viral things combined together to create still same tone of voice, and virality. And that then has to be done on every single platform. The only people that I see saying, oh, just use AI to repurpose are people with no social proof. So you cannot actually tell me that it works because you haven't grown, or it's people that already have significant amounts of followers that have really strong USPs that can just transition content from platform to another platform and it does well. I'll say until I see somebody post a case study online that shows them going from under 10,000 followers to over 100,000 followers on at least 3 out of 5 platforms. So either YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, LinkedIn. So they've grown over to 100K on a writing platform, on short form platform, and a long form platform. Then I will hold my hands up and say, give me that data set. I'll buy it for whatever amount of money, and I'll train it with my own stuff. I'm not seeing anybody do that. So just to reiterate,
totally
they
agree
can't
with that.
already have a lot of followers somewhere else. And the problem also is that person. This is the problem with AI. The person starting at the under 10,000 followers that's using this AI strategy, they need to build up content that actually goes viral. They need to be a good creator. They can't just be curating. This is the problem with curating that I have, is that if you curate, how do you develop your skill of creating unique content, pure unique content, or to some extent that is like building that like creative skill set, building like just your ability to push out content where people go, wow, that's a really good fucking idea. So there's this problem of AI is creating shortcuts that I think people aren't going to then develop and improve. And yeah, that's just my thoughts there. I've been thinking about this a lot because I want to have this thing where I go long form, top tier piece of content for shorts. Oh yeah, perfect. That's a perfect world. But that's just not, it's not feasible right now.
Okay, I think you're right in the sense that right now doesn't work like that. But you've got to think how early on in this journey we are of generative AI and tools and applications. 2 years ago, we wouldn't even have this conversation. Today, it's arguably possible. And yes, being shilled by a lot of young people saying it's the same movement as the, 4-day diet, get abs in a week. It's the same sort of narrative. The reality is there are no shortcuts in life to the skills, the knowledge, the expertise, true authority in any domain. There isn't a shortcut. You need to do your 10,000 hours. And it's something that I think people in the curation economy, to take this back, miss. They look at there's a phenomenon called front runner bias. So everyone looks at the top content creators and tries to model what they do to gain success. You look at the front runner, you see this in podcasting, you see this across all fields of content creation and beyond. What happens is when you look at the front runner is, on one hand, you don't know the why and what got them there. You don't know the skills, the expertise, the knowledge. You think you do, but you're missing the magic 10%. Also, if you copy number one, the problem with copying number one is you then don't leave room to become number one, to be the original thinker, to be the person that's experimenting on the fringe, that isn't reading the rule book. You leave that opportunity off the table. It will never happen because you're not the person on the frontier. So I think there are two massive problems with like this economy that is forming. But I agree with you today, Ben, like that is state of play. I think in 3 years, it won't be. But the great thinkers, the great creators, the great artists, they're actually still going to win. There won't be shortcuts. You might get a few quick likes, or you might get a little bit of luck in certain areas or channels, but you'll never win long term.
I agree with that. Can I just play devil's advocate a bit here? Because you both have said the same opinion, right? I seen Mr. Beast say the other day that for the first time in social media, there is convergence, i.e. Instagram shorts, YouTube shorts, Instagram Reels, TikTok. These are like 1-minute pieces of video content. And here's the thing I want to say is it better to not post at all on X like an AI version of your long form clip, or is it better to use an AI clip to start an audience? Because in many people's cases, like us, I don't have a presence on X or Twitter at all, and yet I could be using AI to get some of our content out there, even though it's not going to be as good as if I took it seriously and posted natively and learnt the algorithm. And
Yeah.
is it actually better to avoid AI in the current state, or is it better to use it even though it won't do as good as what you want it to do and you could do it natively? I think there's arguments for both, honestly.
Avoid
Yeah,
it. Avoid it. I was gonna.
There you
Sorry,
go,
Ali.
fair enough.
I was going to voice the same before you even said that. I was going to voice that the biggest problem in using AI to, as an additional resource for yourself to go after platforms where you don't have the time to, is that you don't learn the nuances. You don't. You have the problem of whether it's your tone of voice, and then so this is the point I was going to make. When AI tools get a lot better and now everybody has access to the data sets that can train and cause virality no longer is virality.
Yeah, it's pointless.
Because then this viral post, everybody can generate that viral post and it then will no longer be a viral post. And then we're at this point now where you, Chris, who has either grown on X or hasn't, when we then get to that point, how do you think for yourself on that platform? You can't, because you've not thought for yourself. Unless there is still use case for AI a little bit, but I'm a big advocate of learning how to master a platform. This is why you can't be everywhere all at once. Learning how to master a platform with very little help, because then when AI gets better and better and better, you're still going to be ahead of everybody else because you've mastered the nuances. You've mastered it without AI. Those people that haven't mastered it without AI, how are they going to master it?
I'm going to be even more controversial. Ben, I'm taking your role this week, mate. I'm going to be the controversial one, okay? I don't think there'll ever be a data set that will be able to let you go viral. And here's why.
Yeah.
We never know as humans what's going to go viral. Whenever a brand says, go make me a viral piece of content, it's like, you don't know. Like, we're so weird. And by the way, it's only humans that can make things go viral, right? And who knew that the hop to a girl was going to go like that? Who knew? No AI is predicting that. No AI data set will ever have that built in. It's completely new and novel, and no one can actually predict what's going to go viral. So I don't know that an AI will ever predict it either.
I would disagree in the sense that
you can react to things very fast that have just gone viral with AI, but you can't predict what's going to go viral.
No, you can't do with certainty, but all virality has a formula, as in it has some core tenets and principles that underpin it. And in one case, if you're a brand, it's always been, it needs to be relevant in culture. It needs to be attached to a bigger story. It has to make someone feel something, laugh, cry, everything in between, right? There are certain tenets. It has inbuilt distribution into the idea. It's very shareable. So I think there are principles that will lead that a machine will be able to. The problem becomes when everybody's got a machine that's competing.
Yeah,
I think it's
that's what I'm saying.
It's the Ben
That's
point.
the problem I say. Yeah. When everybody's got access to a machine that is trained on the latest data that of things that cause virality, then everybody, and it's so quick. Let's say it's update in the last. I build a model in the last 6 months. You extract every transcript from TikTok ever, and in the last 6 months, and you identify the patterns and you give me my results. When everybody has access to that sort of AI tool, and maybe they won't, and that'd be super expensive, and that would be $1 billion business. But the people who master the platforms and have built their creativity, creativity is a skill, let's say, and by doing the thing themselves, by doing the hard work, those will be the people that continue to win in the future, because they'll be able to stay on top when everyone is not getting anywhere by using the AI tools. There will be people that win. There's always people that win the easy method in AI. But generally, when we look at a bell curve, we look at everybody else, those are people that will still be stuck if they don't learn the hard skills right now.
I couldn't agree more. And my friend almost said it best. He said, if you A/B test everything, we use data, you'll eventually end up with porn. That's the point. You end up with the lowest common denominator and the quickest thrill. And if you want to not just kind of compete in this oversaturated content environment as an individual or a brand, you have to learn the skills. It's one of the biggest reasons as a marketeer. I've operated agencies for nearly a decade, and I always say an agency's job is to make itself redundant. If you want to be a truly exceptional brand, you shouldn't have an over reliance and not develop the muscle for social creativity. It's one of the reasons, as someone that operates a business, I want to content create because I want to be in the weeds, not just in the clouds. I want to be in the weeds to understand, and that gives me authority. I've got friends that have, ran agencies for a long time, and they said until I started content creating, my abilities, skills, my knowledge as a marketeer has just leveled up. I have learned more in the last 6 months of being a content creator on the front line than I have as a marketing strategist for a decade. I hear this time and time and time again. So, chaps, I think we're entering a very interesting era. I think the future will be won by people who have skills, that nurture creativity, that are obsessed, that have original thoughts, original ideas. And there are no shortcuts for that. There are absolutely no shortcuts.
It's good to know, honestly, as a creative agency owner, isn't it? Like, because then you know that there's not going to be a billion more of you next day. Like, as you said, I'd be terrified, Ben, if everyone had this viral AI machine. I really would be terrified by that because of all the creators that try so hard, learn the hard way. And I don't think there will ever be a shortcut to success.
No, there wouldn't. It's going to evolve.
Yeah, I had and I'll leave on a concluded point. There's a tool I've been advocating a lot called Leap AI. And I spoke to the founder on Friday last week. And he was giving me a perspective on how that business has evolved. And I asked the question, what are some of the user cases, the automation workflows that you've been tempted to spin off as a real business? You've got to imagine these marketplaces of automation are fascinating companies because they are democratizing workflows and like solving problems in real time. They're not doing it themselves. They're seeing what people who are building, marketing agencies, creators, individuals, companies are building, and they get a first view on, well, this is really usable. This is a great workflow. That to me is a great starting place for businesses. And one of the core elements that he said most companies are getting value out of isn't in the content video generation space. That is actually somewhat still quite nuanced and difficult. It's really about content multiplying the other way, taking great video content and making it hyper relevant to churn out quality SEO and quality blogs and things of that nature, for reiterating and making newsletters. So he described it as a content multiplier. And that's the space. But to win, you still have to be great content. You can use and leverage platforms, but great content is still great content.
Yeah. Multimodal. That's how I call that particular thing. Like, especially Ben, right? Like, he's the video man. Like, if he focuses on video, then maybe his newsletter and all his other things can be the output of AI at the same quality.
Yeah.
That's what I want.
Yeah.
I have the data there that works on one platform to transition to another platform. It's just.
But wouldn't it be all cool if we could focus on the thing we want to do more?
Yeah, I know, right? Chris, have you got a GPT of your writing style?
Yes, I have actually. Trained it
good?
on.
Rate out of 10.
Oh, rate out of 10. That's a really tough one, because it depends on the context of my prompt towards it. But
then it's not a 10 out of 10 then, is it?
Well, I've trained it on 10,000 emails I've sent, which is a lot more than the average person, So I would say it's about 70 to 80% accurate as to how I would next predict the word, because that's the whole point of it, isn't it? It's like its next word prediction would be either the average of the internet if you didn't train your own GPT, or it'd be the average of your emails if you did train it on your stuff. And I'd say about 7 or 8 out of 10 times that's actually what I'd have written.
Okay, so you're saying your GPT's like drunk and tired, Chris. That's about as good as it is today.
Yeah, and it hallucinates, you know. Sometimes it just makes things up that I never taught it, and that's one of the big AI issues, is like however much you teach it and train it about how you work and stuff, it can just sometimes just go way off script. There's no controlling it right now. It's like the Wild West.
That's the problem. That's not good enough for me.
I know.
That 20-30% could be the difference between a post doing, you know,
but let's say you're the one, you ultimately, Ben, are the one deciding how accurate it was. So if 7 out of 10 times it was good, that's very useful to me, because then that means I only need to rewrite it 3 times instead of.
Can I tell you I'll tell you a little anecdote. So I had an analysis, particularly on LinkedIn. I looked through ideas that I've shared, and all my ideas are videos from speaking, podcasts, this forum here, and I try and layer in context through my writing. So I build on a point and try and give a point of view on what I'm saying in, say, short form. And what's really interesting, and it pained me, my writing style, the work that I'm most proud of, the ideas that stimulate me intellectually, usually don't perform. Some of the things where I haven't been bothered and I've just used my GPT to like list out have performed way better. And I don't know what that says about my natural abilities, but on a sheer performance level, my GPT is better than me. But I don't like how it writes. So that's
that's what I was about to say. Does it feel like you?
Yeah.
No, but
you just said you don't like how it writes.
It's algorithm speaking, algorithm talk. I think that's what you've found out there. Is actually.
So the thing that I have the issue with when I do this myself, it's this when I don't feel like it's not me, I have this like person inside of me that's thinking that other people are going to know that it's not me.
Right.
And that's why I don't like doing it, because they even though they probably won't see it, because I can see it, I think everybody else will be able to see it. And that's what I really don't like, is just the potential of people in my audience going, Ben didn't write that.
But you're very lucky, Ben, in that what you like making is very popular. You know, like you do trends and you do like tactics for creators, like the latest stuff. Now, the massive issue I see with creators right now is that they're all making for algorithms. None of them are making for their fans or even to their true authentic self. They're like, I'm not going to spend 10 hours recording something that no one will see. You know, if it's Ollie and it's just putting an idea out there in text form, maybe that takes 10 minutes. That's okay if it doesn't go viral, you know? But if you spent 10 hours recording a piece of content that literally the algorithm, will not distribute, it is almost pointless unless you're going to send it directly to someone's inbox and say, look, I made this because I wanted you to see it.
If a tree falls in the woods and no one hears it, did it ever fall? That's the question. Gents, just to conclude, I want you to give 3 tips. If you are going to curate, what are your call outs? What are your principles? If you're going to curate someone else's work, someone else's idea, what are your top tips for making it work and doing it ethically?
I'll go first because I can tell Ben doesn't like this subject. So first and foremost, a do follow tag. There's no good mentioning someone by an @ and then not giving them a tag. Like you really, and as to, I don't want to steal one of Ben's here, but I know what he's going to say, and I agree with it in that you need to approach the person whose content it was to let them know that you're going to reshare it. And they may say no, and that's absolutely fine. You know, like you just need to go with what they say and build that bridge. And the final tip from me is always add your own spin on it. Like you said, it's not interesting if you're just resharing something that somebody else wrote, and you need to give your opinion or relate it back to you.
Love it. I think number 2 is wishful thinking. However, Ben, over to you.
So number 1 is having a strategy where you actually go and seek out people or brands or creators that create content that you want to form a strategic partnership with, and actually start curating on top of their content and tagging and collaborating to, you know, build that. No, you don't need to send a cold email, don't need to DM. You just create a bit of content that's good on the back of theirs that they'll appreciate, and then the relationship is starts there. The second one is to have it's all just about strategy here. Have a strategy of, like we discussed right at the start, curation, and following on what Chris said, is curation in its lowest effort form, but also curation in its highest effort form. So creating stuff by resharing because it's low effort, but also creating stuff that's your own unique piece of content that's built off the back of somebody else's, because that's just going to really build your brand stronger and establish yourself, rather than just being the person that just always shares what somebody else shares. Like, we want to see like what you can actually do. Like, are you like you're in terms of creativity? And then the final one, I've been thinking about this for most of the episode and was trying to put it in somewhere, but I didn't, is that I think brands should be bolder in hiring younger people who are creators that can sit on the heads of the table and direct brand strategy around meme culture, because a 35-year-old brand manager can't do that. And we talked about this.
Ouch!
Kind of, we talked about
Jesus,
they just
I
can't.
felt
They
personally
can't.
attacked when you said that, bro. I'm
They
37
can't.
and you're telling me I can't do it.
You don't sit in the same conversations as the 18 and 19-year-old kids that are on the forefront
True, I
of
guess
meme
so.
culture.
Get out the room,
I
boomer.
when
felt
you
that
know
in
when
my heart.
you know when you
Leave the
grow
room,
up as a
boomer.
you know when you grow up as a kid and everyone's talking about this thing on the playground, and this was even before social media, and you talk about it to your parents and they go, "What the hell are you talking about?" And you go, "How do you not know that?" You go, that's you. Yeah, that is you, and that is me, and that is Ollie. There are things happening on social media that are less bigger than Hot Tour that are happening that
that we
everybody
don't know
knows, whether it's geo based and stuff. And I think having somebody that's closer to the ground there can better inform a brand strategy around approaching the meme space, the real like hot topic moments, and how do we there are some smart kids who really understand social, and I think they should be given more of a chance to lead a brand strategy in the meme culture space.
Love it. So just to conclude, number one, give credit where credit is due. However you want to do that, through collaboration, a relationship, letting them know, tagging at the very least. Give people their flowers. Number two, if you are going to curate, make sure you actually care. Don't curate for other people. Do it because you love it. Number three, give a distinctive point of view. I don't need to see the content in isolation. I want to know what you think, and give a real opinion of why it's great. Because if you give actionable value as opposed to curate, that's how you truly build a brand for yourself that isn't just built on the backs of others. And according to Ben, if you're over 30, you are redundant in culture in the world. Your voice doesn't matter, and you are a boomer. So hire young people. Hire the young folk. But I agree with you. Amazing, gents. Love this conversation. I'll see you next week.